Now, for the rest of the hour, we are honored to have Alex Abella on the radio broadcast with us. He's a New York Times notable book author, Emmy-nominated TV reporter, and screenwriter. Alex Abella is the author of Soldiers of Reason, The RAND Corporation, The American Empire, a study of the world's most influential think tank, published by Harcourt. Alex was the first journalist to have full access to RAND's files in Santa Monica, California, and they did not like the response that they got when the book came out. They did not like the results. Abella's nonfiction work includes Shadow Enemies, a nonfiction account of a plot by Adolf Hitler. I've read about this to start a wave of terror and destruction in the United States. Born in Cuba, Alex migrated with his family to the United States when he was age 10. And we really appreciate this accomplished researcher and writer and news reporter for joining us. AlexAbella.com is his website. Alex, good to have you here with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure. I was listening to your reports before. It's really scary what's going on.
Very suspicious, these shootings happening every time universities try to say that students can have concealed carry, and when they were having a prominent concealed carry person speaking at the law school tonight.
Amazing, amazing. You know, it's just like another step into, you know, the consolidation of the military-industrial complex, which is, you know, what came out of RAND. I mean, this is like my book. It deals with the birthplace of the military-industrial complex. And it's funny, too, that in a way it took a former general, Eisenhower, to warn us against this. And, you know, and yet, you know, here we are, all these years later.
Well, for those that don't know, when you watch a movie like Dr. Strangelove made by Stanley Kubrick, they call it the RAND Corporation,
right.
Has a report where they talk about we can nuke Russia and only lose 10 to 20 million Americans. That's really based from my research, but I want you, who knows far more than I, on real reports put out by RAND and some of these shadowy figures that started it. You've got the floor. Break down the history of RAND and why it's so important.
Well, I think, you know, RAND is important for a number of reasons. I mean, dating back, it's the most influential think tank in America, if not in the world. It shaped our policy of nuclear deterrence. It came up with the concept of counterinsurgency, laid the foundation for the Internet, was harbored game theory, came up with something called systems analysis, which revolutionized the U.S. government. But above all, the main thing that it's really, really, really important, which is something that perhaps I should have emphasized even more in the book, but it's very clear there. They came up with a foundation for the wave of financial disasters that we find ourselves in, something called rational choice theory, which was developed by a Nobel Prize winner named Kenneth Arrow, who came up with something called Arrow's stratagem, which in a way went against the precepts of Marxism, and yet turned loose this whole wave of deregulation, people just thinking that, you know, they're only in it for themselves, and like overturn all the concepts on which this country had been based on. That, I think, is their major contribution to, unfortunately, to our national fabric.
When you say it's the most influential think tank in the United States and probably the world, that is not an exaggeration. In fact, it may even be an understatement. From my research, Stanley Kubrick was obsessed with the RAND Corporation, got a lot of the material for several of his films from it, because he realized that they were charting so much of our technological development and sat at the top of the capstone for the scientific and technological elite that Eisenhower talked about in his speech that were controlling the military-industrial complex. Eisenhower quotes about military-industrial complex being dangerous. You know, those are well known, but the rest of his farewell address gets into the scientific, technological elite that was taking over the system, because he was reading their reports. He was seeing what they had to say. Let's start at the beginning. Why did you want to look at RAND Corporation? How were you able to get in to see their internal annals when no one else had been able to do it? And let's walk through all the different things that they developed, including, didn't they develop the idea for mid-air refueling?
Yes, absolutely. And also the idea of second nuclear strike deterrence. And that came out of something called a basing study, which highlighted the weaknesses in our national defense system against a surprise strike by the Russians. Of course, never mind that the Russians, you know, didn't have enough weapons to really do all this, but in any case, had they been able to, they would have been able to.
And not to mention, of course, they helped develop the current COG plan that Northcom uses to militarize and take over our entire society by building a second secretive government.
Well, you know, I think you got a point right there. From the very beginning, you know, RAND has been involved with people who have wanted to create an alternative, a secret government. I mean, for crying out loud, you know, it's like one of the major givers of funds, the people who funded the organization, was the Ford Foundation, and its first president, Geiser, who really believed, you know, in a one-world government controlled by technocrats. I mean, it's really chilling when you go back and you realize, my God, this is the way that it's been going on since the late 1940s. It's amazing. And RAND came up, was developed 1946 as an adjunct of the United States Air Force because there was a general named Hap Arnold who wanted to create the equivalent of the Manhattan Project. As you know, Manhattan Project was the one that came up with the atomic bomb. And what he wanted is that he wanted a combination of military and civilian scientists who would be able to come up with new weapons of destruction. Specifically, they were interested in intercontinental missiles. So they came up with the idea of having this outfit then that would receive money from the military, but actually would be a civilian thing, because he realized that most civilian scientists would not want to work under the strictures of the U.S. Armed Forces. So they set up RAND, which, by the way, the acronym, it means Research and Development. Of course, you know, there's no development. It's always been research. In 1946, and it was housed at Douglas Aircraft here in Santa Monica, because the guy Mr. Douglas, happened to be married to Arnold's daughter. So, you know, they were relations. In any case, they set it up here at Douglas Aircraft. And within a couple of years, RAND was doing so much work for the military that Douglas Aircraft, the company, felt that, you know, its own livelihood was being endangered. So they had to spin it off. And then to spin it off, they went then to the Ford Foundation and to Wells Fargo Bank and got loans and got just outright gifts also from Henry Ford himself. And with that money, then they were able to set up and become independent as a place where they would develop, you know, like new weapons of destruction. And it's been going on ever since. I mean, Bernard Brody, who was the main, who's been called the father of nuclear deterrence, worked there for a while. And as I said, they developed systems analysis, which is a way of, you know, of viewing problems in their context instead of just individually, and and seeing which is the best way to arrive at a result, but all numerically based.
Well, Mr. Abella, I want to go over the fact that they have, you know, literally charted the militarization of police. I mean, almost every policy we see, they charted the course for that. But let's go back, because we're about to go to break. Let's go back to what you talked about, the Ford Foundation and its founder. Tell us about him. And they've had congressional hearings on this, where they openly want global government. I mean, when you actually go to the documents, that's what it says.
That's right.
And so let's talk about their master plan for the planet and what type of documents you saw when you were researching.
Well, the documents are all there. I mean, these things are not hidden, and these are public documents that you can see on which, you know, Geiser, there's been a lot of research on this, in which Geiser, who was the first president of the Ford Foundation and who was one of the founders of the RAND Corporation, also, you know, was an advocate of a one-world government. And so was John Williams, who was the intellectual powerhouse behind the RAND Corporation. And John Williams, who was a mathematician, he advocated nuking the Soviet Union, and then again forming, you know, a one-world government that will be again ruled by technocrats. So it's been there right from the beginning, and there's no avoiding it. And it's the militarization of the country, and it's just appalling. That's one of the things that I point out in the book.
Well, you've hit the key here. And again, you were allowed into their very annals, the nexus from RAND to Ford. The Ford documents came out in the 77 hearings in Congress, and the right-wing media, Rush Limbaugh, all of them for decades, said no global government exists. Now they're forced to admit it because the world government's in the open, but they claim it's low-level communist professors.
Oh, please.
When the Pentagon created at Presidio the UN, the Pentagon created the plan for world government. Meanwhile, they've got all these right-wingers saying the Pentagon's fighting world government. They gave birth to this corporate world government. And you've got Tiny Tim Geithner, whose family was involved at the Ford Foundation, who is now the head of the Treasury.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's an old relationship. Not only that, and this is what I want to go back to what I mentioned before. I mean, they laid the theoretical foundation for this so that people would eventually accept it as being the right way to be.
Well, Alex, this is Bombshell. I want to tell folks how to get your book. And I really want to thank Tommy Pilata, who's met you and talked to you, for recommending you for the show, because just amazing on-spot, on-target research. Alex Jones here with a very important announcement for truth seekers. We've carried a lot of amazing films and books over the years on the online video bookstore at Infowars.com. And out of all the titles we've carried, one stands out because it is just so chillingly convincing. And that's Dreams from My Real Father by Joel Gilbert, available at Infowars.com. This film exposes the fraud that Obama is like nothing I've seen. If you want to know who Obama's real daddy is, this is the film for you. Don't forget, your purchase supports our broadcast and our growing media network. You'll also find at InfoWarsShop.com None Dare Call a Conspiracy by Gary Allen, the book that woke me up. We're also carrying Behind the Green Mask, UN Agenda 21 by Rosa Corey. This book is coffin nails to the globalist takeover. The Greater Good, the most professional and up-to-date film I've ever seen exposing the scourge that is vaccines. These titles and a lot more are all available at InfoWarsShop.com. And I'm just amazed by our guests. This is a short segment, long segment coming up. Alex Abella. He has written the Bombshell book. I've read several chapters online, but I haven't gotten it yet. I'm going to read it. But just everything he's talking about jives with my research. But he was the only... Alex, before we get into systems analysis and all of this and the world government, how did you get in? Tommy Pilata told me some of the story.
Well, the story was that, I mean, I just finished doing my previous book. This book is called Soldiers of Reason. The previous one was called Shadow Enemies, which was, you know, the one about the terrorists that were sent here by Hitler, a personal mission from Hitler right after Pearl Harbor to start a wave of terror in the United States with, you know, that landed on 2 U-boats, one in Long Island and one down in Florida. And, you know, there was, but the guy who was heading the whole thing flipped. He went over to the FBI, but the FBI wouldn't listen to him. So he had to personally go down to Washington. And then, so it was like a ticking time bomb after that. Because,
and the Germans wanted to blow up ammunition dumps.
Yes. Oh, not only that, they also wanted to blow up the aqueduct, you know, the waterworks in New York City. They wanted to put bombs in train stations, in major Jewish-owned department stores, which back then in New York meant probably most of them. It's amazing what they wanted to do. So it was like this whole FBI race trying to, first of all, they didn't believe the guy. Then when they did believe him, then they had to find all the other people that had scattered all over the country. So it was a fascinating story. In any case.
Well, that's how research works. You're doing something on one thing, and then it leads you to something entirely different.
Absolutely. So I was citing books for that book when I saw that, because I co-wrote that, and a friend of my co-author was there, and this person happened to be fairly highly placed within the RAND organization. And I realized, oh my God, the last time I heard about RAND, I was back at Columbia. I was in college. And, you know, they were like masters of deception and this and that. I was thinking, I wonder if anybody's done anything about that. And so I started looking up, you know, the research, doing some research whether anybody had written about it, and apparently nobody had for a long, long time. And I approached them, and much to my surprise, they said, yes, we'll do it. And at the time, they told me this was either the smartest or the dumbest move we have ever made. You know, I don't know. That's for others to decide. In any case, they opened up their files, and they were totally cooperative. I have nothing bad to say about that.
And
however, I do think that they expected a different perspective. I mean, I laid down the facts just as they are, but I think that they expected me to come to different conclusions.
So you literally got a first-class ticket on that express elevator down the rabbit hole.
That's right. Very good. Very well put. That's exactly how I felt, because the times you read these things and you go, how could this be true? How could they be? You know, it's like... some of the plans that were gestated over there at RAND are just, were even like 50 years later, you read them and you say, how could anybody ever think of anything like this? Not only, obviously, control the population, but when you talk about nuclear destruction, about nuclear holocaust, how we can survive even if 50 million people die, because all of them will be dead, but yet we'll be surviving. And I'm thinking, this is like insane. And of course, that's one of the things that Eisenhower was against, because Eisenhower, having been a general, he knew what death was all about.
Oh, yeah, Curtis LeMay, for those that don't know, he wanted to have nuclear war, and a lot of them did, and the RAND Corporation was there going, literally the scene from Dr. Strangelove where the general's saying, look, let's have the nuclear war. It's going to be great. We've got lots of mine shaft underground bases. There'll be 10 women for every man.
Absolutely. Not only that, they went well far beyond that. I mean, the main guy who did that, was a popularizer of that particular approach, was a guy named Herman Kahn, who was like this big fat guy who worked, who was later became a futurologist, thinking about what the future is going to be like. But at the time, he was a physicist who had been hanging out with all these different people at RAND who had developed all these different concepts, and he just decided to give lectures on this. I mean, and when people first heard this, like in the 1950s, early 60s, and I was a kid at the time, I vaguely remember all this. I mean, people were throwing up when they heard these things, and it was mass murder, basically, is what we're talking about. But yet they said, no, this is the rational way to do things. This is what we have to do if we want to win. And Eisenhower, when he heard all these things, he said, you guys have nuts. There's no way we're going to do this. And that's why he cut down the Pentagon budget.
And at that same time, Lemnitzer, the head of the Joint Chiefs, came to him with Operation Northwoods that my intel shows was RAND influenced, and said, let's stage terror attacks, sir. Let's remote control airplanes and crash them. Let's bomb D.C. Stay there. We're going to come back with stage terror, global government, control of the U.S. population, water fluoridation, the loving helpers at the RAND Corporation. They gave you the internet, in-flight refueling, systems analysis, everything. You like living in the New World Order? You can thank the RAND Corporation.
Do you understand how dark it is? How far down the line we are? How late it is?
Soldiers of Reason, the RAND Corporation and the American Empire. Available where all good books are sold. His website's alexabella.com. Abella spelled A-B-E-L-L-A, alexabella.com. And if you just read publicly available Ford and Carnegie Foundation, they said, we're going to start wars so we can take over the planet to then end war. We're going to set up the UN as a fake socialist front to basically take over the planet. That's what we've gotten on that end. But he got it from one of their main think tanks where they were developing the specifics of their prime directive, and he's the only guy to ever get in and get these. And I guess because he wrote a book about the Nazis and a secret plan, they thought it would be something like that, but it certainly wasn't. Soldiers of Reason, please continue. I mean, go back into the nasty, horrible things they were planning, the ideas. You were talking about Eisenhower being shaken by them. That's even in Frontline specials about Northwoods.
Absolutely. I mean, Eisenhower, basically, he realized after a while that, that nobody won in a nuclear war. But yet these people, led by scientists in RAND and their advisors, and also, leaders of the military-industrial complex, people whose industries, depended on Pentagon largesse, on Pentagon spending a lot of money. They kept pressing him like, you have to increase the Pentagon budget. The Russians are coming after us. We have a missile gap. We have all these things. And Eisenhower was not buying any of that. In fact, he was the one who started then trying to coexist with the Soviet Union, trying to come to some kind of understanding, obviously without letting our guard down. I mean, he did authorize the U-2.
But if there was a nuclear war, the military-industrial complex wouldn't just get more funds, they would reorganize the entire country.
Absolutely, absolutely. That would have been their golden ticket, to get in and just reshape everything without having to give anybody any excuses, because, it's a war, martial law, and it's over. It's over. It's not just the United States. It would have been the entire world.
Now, what about Northwoods? Are you familiar with that? Did you see anything dealing with government-sponsored terror, false flag events in your RAND research?
Well, I know that was some of the things that were considered by a lot of the people at the time. I mean, I know that you mentioned the whole Northwood incident, and that's after Castro had taken over in Cuba. I myself, obviously, haven't been born there. I mean, I'm familiar with that, and it happened all the time. How do you think we got into Vietnam? I mean, remember, the Gulf of Tonkin resolution? That was totally fake. Everybody knew it at the time, especially in the government, and yet, we got into it, and we got into Vietnam. And, of course, RAND was there from the beginning, advising them, yes, get in, and then advising them, no, get out. And it's the same thing that happened in Iraq. At first saying, no, we should go in, and then once we were in, they say, well, but on the other hand, you're not putting in enough boots on the ground here in order to be able to carry out.
And we see the Pentagon Papers, our intel is leaked on purpose to end it. That's RAND Corporation, Daniel Ellsberg. We see the architect of the Vietnam War being former RAND, Robert McNamara.
That's right. He was never formally affiliated with RAND, but he definitely hired. He picked the brains of the RAND Corporation to run the Pentagon, because both those guys at RAND and McNamara were numbers people. Remember, and by the way, he had been in charge, the Ford Corporation, right? He had run the Ford Corporation. He was the youngest CEO at the time. He was only 40 when he ran Ford, at the time when Ford was really a major powerhouse in American industry. And he went from the Ford Corporation to the Pentagon, and he was chosen at the behest of people who were affiliated with RAND and RAND people themselves. And then he started picking people like Hitch, who was his controller, and Alan Enthoven, who went over there and instituted systems analysis within the Pentagon. And from there, that systems analysis approach was adopted by the entire U.S. government. So the relationship between the two is it's been there from the beginning, and it continues to this day.
And we see the model of the Pentagon using contractors to not just carry out illegal spying and their dirty work, but to really be in the command seat of the Pentagon and government agencies itself. That RAND model is now being duplicated like cancer metastasizing.
That's right, because you know why? Again, let's see if we can follow this if you grant me a couple of seconds here, which is RAND was advocating a volunteer army. It was one of the first major institutions to come out in favor of a volunteer army. Why? Obviously because it would favor a lot of people and a lot of industries that they're in bed with, but also because it really ties in so neatly with the concept that they developed, that of rational choice, which I was mentioning before, which is the concept that there is really no such thing as patriotism or religion, because people are all selfish creatures, and therefore the only thing that counts is what I can get for myself. Matter of fact, that if you get more than 4 people in the room, there really isn't any way that you can have a democratic solution to anything, because one's will has to be imposed over the others. And this is demonstrated by a mathematical sleight of hand. In other words, they lay a rational foundation for the changes in the approach to our government that would definitely change the physiognomy of the country and the way that we live today. I mean, that's how they were able to come up with the foundation for deregulating industries, for charging, in some places charging you for getting going into certain areas of certain areas and charging you more for a license in different places, even for the deductible. I mean, the deductible on your health insurance, that came out of an experiment that was carried out by RAND. If you look at all their work, it's all off a piece, because they're rational people. They believe in numbers. They believe we're all selfish, and therefore everything has to be done according to which is the way in which we can get the most profit and that people can be the most selfish about, which I think is a total denial of what this country is about. I mean, in this country, we shouldn't be, we've become consumers. But remember, we were supposed to be patriots. We were supposed to be people who were citizens, who had duties and responsibilities, as well as privileges. And now we've just become consumers. We can get a good deal or a bad deal. And I'm sorry, but that's not the country that I grew up in. But yet, this is the result of this perfidious doctrine called rational choice, which came out directly of the RAND Corporation.
So this is how they break it down to primitive mass movements of psychology. And Google and the Pentagon now admit they, quote, have software that can predict mass movements and even individual movements. And so they're always 100 steps ahead of us, knowing what our deepest desires are, literally like the devil. They know what we will sell out for when they take us up on the mountain, and we end up doing it for chicken feed, and they figured out all the different actuaries to do that. And I want you to expand on this, but I wanted to go over just some mainstream news headlines from today. Obama's internet wiretap move, just one small facet of total domination project. Here's Wired Magazine. Exclusive Google CIA invests in future of web monitoring. The investment arm of the CIA and Google are both backing a company, itself backed by the government, that monitors the web in real time and says it uses the information to predict the future. So how do they get the Pentagon people to go along with this? They have them retire. They go into this software company, and now they get a profit from surveilling the public. Here's another one. Technology identifies troubled individuals, pre-crime, the Buffalo News. Imagine using the same technology to locate a lone bomber before he carries out his terrorist act, to identify a troubled veteran or first responder ground down by tragedies and violence. Stop imagining. Then it goes into law enforcement, now using all of this software of pre-crime where, oh, we're arresting you because the actuaries show you're a criminal. This is the system. You talk about RAND helping develop with DARPA what we know as the internet. Here's another one. U.S. should be able to shut down the internet. Former CIA chief says, the disgraced former head of the CIA. New cybersecurity bill gives Obama power to shut down companies that don't agree to go under Homeland Security control. Then they hand out little Homeland Security clearances to all of these private corporate people that the Washington Post reported on, Top Secret USA. Now they're under government control, plus they're getting supplemental money, and they're on a power trip, turning everyone into spies. Is this not the scientific dictatorship backed by the military-industrial complex, literally slowly taking over and re-engineering our entire society to where the only jobs you'll be able to get are basically in Homeland Security-related systems? This is taking over our entire economic and social environment where it's impossible to revolt because we are literally married to this system.
Not only that, we're not even aware sometimes that this is what's going on, because we take as correct all these premises that we are always devoted to numbers, that we're always just seeking self-gratification, they're only thinking of ourselves. This is why when the United States goes to countries like Iraq or goes to a place like Afghanistan and meets up with hideous people such as the Taliban, but people who are not afraid to die, they don't know how to deal with that, because those people do not think in terms of numbers. They think in terms of causes. They think in terms that go beyond the individual. And that's when we run aground. And that's the problem that, you know, we're gonna have whenever we go to a foreign country. But again, I mean, what I want to emphasize is that we have to get away from this. We have to realize that we're not machines. We're not economic processes. We are human beings. We are people, and we are Americans, and we are citizens, which means we have responsibilities, and which means also that we have privileges and rights. We're not consumers. We should get away from this whole concept of whatever we can get at the lowest cost, because we have to think that there are reasons, there are things that go beyond all this that are more important than money. And as long as we keep buying that kind of rationale for our thinking, we're going to keep sinking further and further into this morass, and we're going to be even more susceptible to the kind of technocratic dictatorship that you have been talking about.
Well, again, Mr. Abella, you went right to the documents and found the same thing. I'm just going off what they say. In fact, right over here, for PrisonPlanet.tv viewers, and it's clear I'm going to get you up for a full 2 hours in the near future because your knowledge is so great. It's so refreshing and buoying when I do connect with people like you who see it, because we're literally losing our soul. But here's National Intelligence Council, ISS, European Union, Global Governance 2025 at a critical juncture. Give me a document cam shot. And the National Intelligence Council, Global Trends 2025, a transformed world, they say that by 2025, they're going to have us totally drugged, totally brainwashed, and that they're going to start genetically engineering us as literal suboids. I'm not the one saying this. and that they're going to just basically kill the majority of us. Has your research brought you into this? Because I'm showing these reports. I've read the quotes, you know, in the last 2 years on air. I mean, this is so diabolical. This is what they call full spectrum dominance. Did you run into any of the transhumanist, eugenicist, human engineering plans when you were researching these people?
No, unfortunately, those are top secret, and I was not granted top secret access to those things. That's something however, I know that's those are subjects that RAND obviously has looked at. I wouldn't say it, you know, to be fair about this, I wouldn't say that they are totally involved in this. But what you have to realize is that if you set the parameters, if you set the background, if you say, yeah, you can do that because that is a rational thing to do, you're falling into that kind of trap. So even though they may not be the ones who actually set up the test tubes, who actually shoot you give you the injection, they're the ones who are saying that is the right thing to do, and go ahead and do it.
Yeah, they're the brains that set up the new philosophy or thought paradigm that says survival of the fittest, because that's what they state. They say if we don't do this, someone else will do it, and they say if we don't have full spectrum dominance, somebody's going to set up a new weapon system that will destroy the earth. So we've got to take over with pure hard-nosed evil, to kind of like Churchill said, the truth must be guarded by a bodyguard of lies.
Right, exactly. It's just awful because. Which is my main point, which is it's a lack of ethical considerations. Nowhere, when you deal with people like this, do you get an approach of thinking, well, is this the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do? It's just a very simple thing that we're taught when we're children. You know, you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't hit Johnny if he hasn't done anything to you. You shouldn't steal. You shouldn't do things that are bad because they're ethics. These guys don't think in terms of ethics.
Well, what happened 9 years ago? The media tried to sell us that torture was good, even of people's children.
Exactly.
And Jack Bauer was our hero.
Yes, I know. It was appalling. Well, at least Jack Bauer always apologized in a way, and so because it had to be done. But, I mean, these other guys never even, they laughed about it. Remember Abu Ghraib? They made a joke out of it. And we were torturing these people. Regardless of whether they deserved it or not, we are Americans. We don't torture. We don't do that. But undeniably, we were doing it, and it was authorized at the highest levels of government. I'm ashamed every time I think of that. I'm ashamed of being American when I hear things like that.
Well, just so you know, sir, they have declassified a lot of this. I mean, I'm reading to you from Global Governance 2025, National Intelligence Council, European Union Security Studies Division, and then I've got the Pentagon U.S. Division here in the second report, Global Trends 2025, A Transformed World, where they talk about turning us into biological androids, and they say the trend is we will be biological androids by 2025. By that, they will totally have full spectrum brainwashing through television, through the culture. They say they're going to remove all of our false morals so they can pre-program. So that's why they don't like real Christians. That's why they don't like Muslims. You can make a judgment about radical Muslims that they're bad or whatever. I mean, I'm not even defending their view of stoning women or whatever. Right. My point is they don't fit into the corporate Borg. The Borg have landed, and it's the Pentagon thinkers, and they're saying we're going to wipe everybody out. And so anybody that doesn't fit in their system, anybody that can see our television and can tell it's brainwashing, even if they are cavemen beating their wives, they're coming in and saying, we're going to wipe these people out then. That's
right. That's what I'm saying. We have to take back our country. We cannot allow these people to impose this kind of thinking on us. That's not what America is all about. And as when you're talking about androids, you know, in a way that doesn't surprise me because, you know, a lot of these plans came out of a very obscure office out of the Pentagon, and I'm sure you're aware of it, called the Office of Net Assessment.
Yes.
Andrew Marshall. And, of course, Andrew Marshall was one of the founders of RAND.
Is he still alive?
There. He's 89 years old, and he's still running it.
Well, no, he was in Wired 2 years ago saying, in the future, it will be the drugs our troops are on, not the weapons. And he talks about how to be in the military, but you're going to get like $1 million a year, they're going to put wiring in your head.
Right, exactly. We're machines. We'll become machines.
No, it is Marshall. I mean, you know everything. No, that's what Marshall at 89 is the grand architect, and he says we're all going to be androids. He thinks he's going to live forever. Have you seen his quotes on that?
Yes, I have.
I mean, he's definitely getting massive life extension right now. That guy runs around like he's 25 years old.
Absolutely. So, you know, and he's still there. And not only that,
But see, that's the ultimate sellout, sir. Will you sell out? Will I sell out for the life extension?
You know, God put me here for a certain lifespan, and when it's my turn to go, I will go. You're
a beautiful person, Alex. I tell you, this guy's incredible. I don't think I've had anybody on in years with this knowledge. I usually say this stuff, people think I'm making it up, but to talk to somebody that actually knows it.
Everything we said came true. Everything we've done's been right.
The website is alexabella.com. The book is Shadow Enemies. Was a previous book. The latest is Soldiers of Reason, the RAND Corporation, the American Empire. This is cold-blooded scientific dictatorship going back 150 years to Galton and others. They were commissioned by the British government. My film Endgame covers it, to come up with a scientific way of full dominance. By the 50s, they called it full spectrum dominance. And the most horrible things you can imagine is their plan. Once they get the Pentagon in your daily life, the secret police, this control grid, 20% of Americans on psychotropic drugs, it's only the beginning. Destroying the family, forcing people into the workforce, both the man and the woman. It's all a master plan, and we'll talk about this more with him in the future. But in the 4 minutes we've got left, then we're going into overdrive with Mr. Lott, the professor, who was going to be speaking at UT tonight, but they canceled it because of the shooting. We're going to be talking to John Lott coming up via cell phone from a car. But, sir, you've got the floor in the last 4 minutes.
Well, nothing. I just wanted to mention that the original title that I had for the book, which was changed with my editor, was Soldiers of Reason, the RAND Corporation, and the Rise of the New World Order. So, I mean, obviously they have been playing along with this. They have been planning it. They have been part of it. They're proud of it. And I just feel that this is something that we all have to do something about. We cannot allow this kind of thinking to prevail. That's not America. That's not our country.
Well, that's not humanity. I mean, humanity as we know it is over under these people's rule.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, they're extending their control over us every day. And the funny thing is that it's been done in such small measures, so gradually. It's like like the story of the frog, right? How to keep the frog from jumping out, right? You gradually increase the water temperature, so like in the end, it cooks without even realizing that it's dying. And that's what's happening to this country. That's why, in a way, the first thing, this is one of the things I wanted to do with my book. I want people to regain their minds, because it all starts with your mind, with your conception. Your thoughts are everything, and how you see the world. And once you have knowledge, once you're aware of that, then you can begin to take it back.
Alex, our logo here with Alex Jones at Infowars.com is because there's a war on for your mind. Becoming aware of this full spectrum assault is the beginning of victory. To use one of their own terms, knowing is half the battle. We have to face up to the cold-blooded, almost reptilian attack. And by reptilian, that primitive, unfeeling, just instinctive will to dominate. And everybody working for this compartmentalized system needs to get outside the box and see the big picture.
Absolutely, because it's also seductive. It's so seductive. I mean, who doesn't want a nice car? Who doesn't want a big house and all the accoutrements that go with it? But first of all, you're not going to get it. And second of all, even if you do get it, there's nothing there, because then you're always, it's like a spinning wheel, it's like you're going round and round and round. You never quite achieve what you want, because you're being trapped in a world in which everything is illusory, and in which everything is like you're being tantalized by these things that you just have to go back and claim your humanity. And that's what we have to do.
Well, exactly. And people inside the power structure, billionaires and others I've talked to, they're scared. They know. They're trying to get mountain redoubts, on Pacific Islands, and are literally preparing for the end of the world. And I say, why? And they go, there'll be nothing left. They're taking it all over you. You're right. And I mean, this is full spectrum dominance. But we don't need those wealthy people, part of the power structure, to run from what their associates have created. We have to have an open public debate about this and say, no.
Absolutely.
I'm not taking microchips in my brain.
That's right.
I don't want Google tracking everything I'm doing. I don't want to be forced on drugs. I don't want to be a biological android. Ask yourselves, what are you doing in this time of great challenge? What are you doing to unlock minds?